And we're looking at the divine feminine, God as mother. And we're looking through a book or reading a book, Sri Sharda Devi and Her Divine Play. Holy Mother is considered by many an incarnation and of God as woman. And in the Vedantic tradition, quite often one of the ideas is that any time that the beloved has incarnated, that he always comes both as male and female. So if there's one, there's the other somewhere nearby, unless he's put them both in one, which also can happen. Um, but it's important. I think it's a good time to mention, these ideas of incarnations and whatnot. It's not required, like in Christianity, it's required that you view God or Jesus that way and that you take him on that way and have that view of things. In the Vedanta, you can think of Ramakrishna and Jesus and Buddha, any of them, in any way that's helpful to you. There's not a requirement that you believe them to play any particular role. If you have the faith to say that they are an avatar or an incarnation of God, beautiful, do that, approach them that way. If he's just a great teacher to you, fine. He himself said, that's also is perfectly fine with me. If you just see him as a friend, as someone, he says, it's what you think of me is not the important thing. And so always hold that in mind. You have the room to be the king of your own mind, as it were. And so you're not being asked to believe things that are impossible to believe. You're not asked to believe anything, actually. Believing is not an important aspect. It's the teachings and what you feel like doing with them and how successful you are in carrying them out in yourself is really what we're looking for. So Holy Mother has been talking. She was just giving initiation to someone. And she talks a little bit about it here. I cheated a little bit and read ahead by a paragraph or two to kind of see what we were getting into. And so while giving initiation, Holy Mother selected the disciples' Ishta, or their chosen ideal, and a mantra connected to that deity. Right? So for initiation, well, it's really just an initiation into your spiritual practice. Salvation's not tied to it in the same way that also us that are familiar with Christianity. It's not really in that way. It's not a saving moment, a saving grace. That grace is available to everybody. There's no requirement but your faith in taking hold of that. But you get a mantra. You get a mantra, a name of God, and a phrase that has been successful in bringing somebody to enlightenment. So the mantras that were given from our teachers are mantras that have been successful in bringing someone to realization. And so that helps us to have a little bit of faith in that. And the chosen ideal, again, because Vedanta doesn't just give you one ideal that you have to follow, you've got a whole bouquet of flowers to choose from. And so at the time of your initiation is the time when you kind of decide how you're going to approach God, how you're going to orient yourself for your journey. And you take a guru at that time. The person who's giving you your initiation, giving you your mantra, becomes your teacher. And as your teacher, you're responsible for treating them like God. And so literally, if they give you a spiritual instruction, you follow it. If you don't want to follow it, then you have a conversation with them about it and see if you can talk them out of it or provide a better alternative. But if in the end they say, no, do this, then you do this. And the task in this, I've mentioned this before, but it's a very unique thing about a guru. Ramakrishna makes a statement somewhere. He says, even if your guru visits the grog shop, even if they hang out at the bar, they're a drinker and hang out at the bar, he says, they're still your guru and you still treat them like God. You still follow their instructions implicitly. And he says, if it's appropriate or when it's appropriate, God will bring you a better guru if that's necessary for you. But in the meantime, you follow that guru. So it's not a matter of you judging that person's life and saying, you judge them before you approach them to become your guru. Before you choose them, you get to know them a little bit and whatnot. But even that isn't necessary in a sense that we have one guru, and that one guru is that which was Jesus, that which was Buddha, that which was Rama, that which was Krishna. is the teacher, and that indwelling spirit is within all of us, that internal guru. But that internal guru can only be accessed through pure mind, right? And so most of us lost our pure mind or gave it up for things that we were more interested in some lifetimes ago. And so we have to come back to that unselfish mind. Pure mind means a mind with no me or mine in it. And it's in that silence of pure mind that we can hear the instructions of the inner guru. So until we come to that point, we are living in an ego state where we are dealing with the thought of ourself rather than ourself directly. And we live in the mind and relate to the mind, thinking that it's the world that we live in, but it's actually just the mind that we're living in. And so until we break that habit, we can't really get into the heart. We can't really find that sacred shrine within where the voice of the guru can be heard. And so the teaching for having a guru is to give the idea is to give you a teacher that's outside of your ego sphere, right? Our problem with in spiritual life, if we don't have a teacher, then we're basically just putting our ego in charge. We're basically doing the practices that we like, and we're reading the scriptures that appeal to us, and we're dealing with the issues that we think are important, right? And so you're not necessarily getting an objective training. And so the idea of the guru is it's somebody that's outside of your ego sphere. And more than what they tell you, the important thing in that relationship is you're seeing them as God and setting yourself in obedience to them, because that's one of the major reasons for a guru, is to help you break that ego, to wear that ego down, to get rid of egoism. And so that's why Ramakrishna would say, hey, look, even if your guru goes to the bar, you listen to him, because it's an act of humility to accept teaching from somebody you might not think knows more than you or is farther along than you. And that is the value to you. That is why it's that more than what they're saying, it's that willingness to divorce your ego and to hear something outside of its influence for teaching, right? And if that's not going well and you really think that you're being abused, then you just cry to the mother, and mother will give you a new teacher if that's the appropriate thing, right? But she might not. And if she doesn't, it's not your place to go out and look for another one necessarily, although nothing's forbidden. So she's giving initiation, and when she selected the disciples Ishta, their chosen ideal, when she says, you're a disciple of Jesus, or, oh, you are a disciple of Shiva, or the guru will know and will have some insight to it, and we get to know a little bit about that here in a minute. So the mother selects the disciples Ishta, or chosen ideal, and a mantra connected to that deity. Sometimes she asked about the disciples' family tradition, because most disciples, or most Indian families, have a family guru, a guru that sort of takes responsibility for the family's spirituality. And the family will also have a chosen ideal, a deity that they worship on their shrine. It's one of the unique things about the way Vedanta is practiced generally, is that it's more practiced in a home than at a church or a temple, that most of its roots lie in the home of the practitioner. So it's a very personal relationship. And so most people whose family in India, their family will have a chosen ideal already and a history with a guru. And often their guru has been from the same family for many generations, usually, which is also a very grounding and very nice idea. But regardless of whether the disciple was Vaishnava or Shakta, she initiated him or her according to what she considered to be best for the disciple. So that's the role of the guru, is to look at the disciple and, through the power of their own practice, their own relationship with the divine, to look at that disciple and have a knowing about what the chosen ideal is for that disciple, how that disciple would move forward the fastest, so that she might give you a Jesus mantra or a Ramakrishna mantra or a Holy Mother mantra, or any other mantra like that is possible. When the disciple could not decide on an Ishta, so if somebody doesn't know what their choices are or hasn't thought about that or doesn't know what to think about that, then Holy Mother herself chose the particular form and name of the Godhead. Sometimes, just before initiation, she would meditate to discover the mantra suitable for the person. It would be revealed to her in pure mind. Okay, so this is what we're talking about here in that pure mind. So if they weren't sure who their chosen ideal was, they, do I like Christ? Do I like Buddha? Am I drawn to Rama? If you don't know, then the teacher is her responsibility or his responsibility to know and to help you to find your faith, find your chosen ideal. And a lot of times it's based on your disposition. If you're somebody who can't sit still, then probably not going to be a Raja Yogi or a Jnana Yogi. If you're someone who loves to sit still, then Jnana is a great path for you. Maybe Raja is a good path for you. But if you're someone who's constantly on the move and just has to be doing, Karma Yoga might be your better path. And so your teacher might put you in touch with a chosen ideal that's a Karma Yogi in there. That's one of the beautiful things about Ramakrishna, though, is in Ramakrishna you can see all of the ideals, because if you read his life, you read the Great Master, we see that many of the incarnations, who are all the same being anyway, but entered into Ramakrishna. He had the experiences of them entering into his body, kind of highlighting the idea that he is the meta guru, as it were, the meta incarnation, so that Jesus can be worshipped through the body of Ramakrishna. Krishna could be worshipped. Rama could be worshipped. Chaitanya, that he is. That's one of the special things about his mission, was that he was the embodiment of all gods and goddesses, and so all of them can be venerated through this one form. And so Mother would sometimes, before the initiation, she would meditate, quiet her mind, so that she could be more objective and more able to hear her own pure mind, the mind. In the gospel, that's one of the scriptures I refer to quite often, where Ramakrishna says, "That which arises in pure mind is the voice of the divine." And so this becomes how we get our answers to prayers and how we know what to do. And what is best is by finding pure mind, removing me and mine from pure mind, right? And silencing it a bit and going underneath mind, going before mind into that silence of the self. And in that very pregnant silence of the self is where we find our connection with the divine, where we can get our answers to prayers and questions that we might have. The mantra has an intrinsic power. Holy Mother said, the mantra purifies the body. One becomes pure by repeating the name of God given by the Guru. Once a disciple asked Holy Mother if the mere repetition of the mantra as taught by an adept guru really helped the aspirant, or if he or she did not possess, even if she or he did not possess intense devotion. Holy Mother answered, whether you jump into water or are pushed into it, your cloth will be soaked, will it not? So it's a marvelous idea. There's several beautiful things here, actually, that I find quite touching. Is this promise that the mantra purifies the mind and the body, and by purifies, what does that mean? It takes selfishness out of it. It removes me and mine from the body and from the mind. And that's very important, because as long as we believe ourselves to be the body, then it's very difficult for us to overcome the body, to control the body and its wants and its needs and its desires. Because by giving the body what it wants, we think that we're giving ourselves what we want, because we're identified with the body. And we can tell that by the way we talk about it. Somebody asks, what is your favorite food? Well, I can tell you the soul has no favorite food. The soul has never eaten anything in that sense. And so favorite foods belong to bodies, and in a sense belong to mind also. And so this is the trouble with believing that you're a body. You don't know who to please. You can't know what's important. And that's why we get pulled into doing all kinds of things that force people to ask the question, well, if there's such a God, how come these crazy things are happening around the world? Well, there is a great God, there is a loving God, and the reason that these things happen around the world is because we're listening to our bodies and minds first, right? Before we're listening to the voice of the divine, which we don't even hear because it's much more subtle than the voice of the body or voice of mind. And so we get all caught up. And so she's saying here that just repeating this mantra, just repeating this name over and over in your mind indicates God, the presence of God, right? Because you cannot separate name and form. So they say the mantra and God are the same. You cannot say the name of God without invoking the presence of God. And this is a very beautiful thing to understand while you're doing your practice, while you're doing your mantra, that name and that form are present. The mantra is the divine. And so to follow that mantra within yourself will take you to the shrine of the heart. Will show you where we're trying to establish ourselves, our true self, where our real nature is, so that we move our identity out of mind, move our identity out of body, and allow it to remain in the center of rest, the center of the shrine, the center of the heart, right? And the beautiful thing here is that it's not really your effort that is doing this, because the person's asking, if you do this without any devotion or not, does it still work? And Holy Mother says, well, yes, it does still work, even if you don't have devotion or even if you have minimum faith in it. If you do it, it will work. And, I'm kind of on a new kick lately with this whole approach towards spiritual practice. And this falls right in line with that. In spiritual practice, you're not the doer, actually, in anything, but we'll stick to spiritual practice for now. In spiritual practice, you're not the doer. So your spiritual practice is an act of surrender. It's an act of undoing. So you sit there and you try and move yourself out of mind by being unconcerned with what's going through it, not believing it to be about you and for you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
So, saying my mantra is not my favorite part of spiritual practice.
Uh-huh.
But I always thought I was supposed to do it with all this feeling. So actually, this is good news for me. That it's beneficial. It's acceptable even without intensity.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And because we're in a state of constant flux, at least the body mind is, constant change. And so things change. If you could get to know somebody at first and they won't be your favorite person, but after you've known them for a year, they've come into your inner circle. They've become one of your closer friends. And in time, they prove themselves to be very loyal and very, very dedicated to their relationship with you, and you love them even more. They become one of your closer, better friends. And so this practice is very much like that. In the beginning, yes. In the beginning, boy, if my if my meditations now looked like they looked like 30 years ago when I started it, I couldn't have kept it going. Of course, then I was only doing 2 minutes twice a day. But that's the beautiful thing about this, is it's not stagnant. It's a dynamic thing that's happening between you and the universe, you and the whole. And yeah, definitely. And in the beginning, things are very difficult. I think most things have to be a matter of faith, because all we're experiencing is body mind. That's all we're paying attention to. That's what we're engrossed with, and that's what we like and what we feel we are. And so things spiritual don't go very deep yet. They don't move us as deeply as hunger does, or as tiredness does, or whatnot. But in time, our spiritual practice becomes beautiful. It becomes the very source of beauty in our lives. And, the intensity that you give it is helpful. It's helpful to do it with devotion. It's helpful to do it with intensity. But if that's not there, just doing it is important. because just doing it will give it that space for, for the camel to get in the tent, as it were. If you give mother a little sliver in the door, she'll get in. You know, she'll earn your love, she'll earn your respect because she is your mother, or Takor, or depending how you approach God. But you begin to know this authenticity, this depth of sincerity within your chosen ideal, and it moves within you from being imagination to being experience. And it may not be consistent in that, but you'll get shots of it here and there that will give you great encouragement. And if it's right for you, mother may do something in there that deepens your faith for the rest of your life. Right. And so make yourself available, because really that's what our practice is. Our practice is not that we go in and do something and that it's what we're doing that is the important thing. It's the making ourselves available to the beloved. Mother's doing all the work. She's the one that's going to change you. She's the one that's going to purify you. She's the one that's going to help you find your nature, who you are, and to bring you home. And so really our meditation is making ourselves available to the presence for that work. It's not a doing it of ourselves, of our own accord. We're not the doer. We know that from many places in the gospel and other writings, that we're not ultimately the doer. And so our spiritual practice, foremost, is one of the places where we know this, where we accept this, but we surrender ourselves to the presence, to the mother, to be inspired, to be put back together, as it were. I like my puppet story that I like to tell. I had that puppet in my toy box, and so it was one of those string puppets, marionettes. And it was a little guy with a sombrero and some guns in his hand. And I pulled it out of the toy box. And of course, it was all tangled up, and it wouldn't work at all. And I was crushed. I thought, oh my gosh, it's broken. It's never going to work. And I was crying, and I took it to my dad, and handed it to my father, and watched adult magic happen, as he held it there and he picked the foot up and put it through that hole, and picked the arm up and pulled it through this string, and took this string and lifted it around the handle and let it drop. And I saw him sequentially do all of these things. And when he finished, the marionette was perfect, was back to the way that it was. And I was like, oh my God, how did he know how to do all of that stuff? I can't even remember what he did. How am I ever going to be able to do that on my own like that? Right. And so spiritual practice is like that. We have got this inner marionette that we are, and it's all tangled. The strings are going in all kinds of directions, and we can't figure anything out. And so what we're doing in our practice is we're going to mother, and we're handing our marionette to mother, our inner marionette, handing our inner marionette to mother and saying, it doesn't work. I'm not happy. And mother fixes it. Mother will do her adult magic and hand it back to you, to your awe and your amazement. So this is what she's talking about. So it's important to note that she goes into meditation to hear the voice of the teacher inside, to give her the mantra to give to the student, to give her the chosen ideal for the student. So this is how we access the presence, is through silence, by finding the inner shrine and going there in silence with no noise, no thought, no mind, no body, no disturbance. And we just turn all of our senses into ears, listening. We don't, at that point in our practice, need to use any of our organs of action. We just sit there in complete surrender with everything tuned to this inner silence. And then we get taught, not through voices or through thoughts or thinkings, we get taught through knowings, right? There's not super clear ways to talk about that. But so mother says, whether you jump in the water or pushed into it, your cloth will be soaked, will it not? So do your practice. Even if you don't think you're doing any good, even if you think that you're the world's worst meditator, not the point. right? It's not because we're perfect that we practice. It's not because we've already realized God. Oh, well, it actually is. Never mind on that one, because that is that Buddhist statement that we sit not to realize God, but we sit to know that we are already realized, right? So again, that reinforces that notion that we're not doing something in our practice, we're accepting something. We're accepting the gift of realization from the divine. And that will come through grace when we're able to hold it, right? So we have to do some work has to be done in the body. The divine has to get in there and shore up some of our lower chakras so that when he or she or that pours this enormous amount of energy into us, this enormous amount of presence, that we can hold it, that it doesn't cause us to completely lose our marbles, right? And so mothers may be waiting for that in your practice, but you just keep going and you keep sitting and you keep being faithful in that. And through that, we come to our realization. Through that, we access grace. Holy Mother was not an ordinary guru who initiates with elaborate rituals and follows traditional methods. Her initiation was simple and short. She selected the chosen deity and gave the mantra accordingly, and showed the disciple how to count the repetitions of the mantra on the fingers or a rosary. Swami Aseshananda was initiated by Holy Mother. After she passed away, he became Swami Sharadananda's private secretary. When he observed Sharadananda's elaborate method of giving initiation, he said to the Swami, "Maharaj, Holy Mother instructed me in a very simple way. She did not ask me to repeat the mantra for a fixed number of times in the morning or evening or for special days and all that. She did not give me any fixed method. Maharaj, I want a step-by-step procedure. Could you please add something?" Swami Sharadananda responded, "You are the greatest fool. Holy Mother is the Divine Mother herself. All these methods and procedures are given by other teachers, but not by Holy Mother. Whatever Holy Mother has given you is the last word in spiritual life. You cling to the mantra, repeat it, meditate, and think of your chosen ideal. And when longing for the vision of God comes, you will find that your mind will know it, that your mind will be fixed on the divine spirit, and that all your desires will be fulfilled. Do you mean to say that I should add something to what Holy Mother has given you? It is due to her grace that I'm even here now," right? So this wonderful faith, of course, we don't have that opportunity because, of course, Holy Mother is that inner guru. She is that inner voice. So in a sense, we do, but we haven't been initiated by her. But you see their view, the view of the Divine Mother, like even in her time, she was recognized for what she was. It took them a while, but when it occurred to them, then they knew simply and deeply her nature. The remover of sin and bad karma. Being a guru is not easy. It is beyond the capacity of an ordinary guru to take responsibility for another's bad karma or to absorb a disciple's sin and its consequences. Only a divine being has the power of redemption. The Christian tradition speaks of vicarious atonement. Jesus took upon himself the punishment for the sins of others. We find that Ramakrishna took Jagadamba's, Mathur's wife, illness on himself and suffered from dysentery for several months. He also took on Girish's sins and suffered from cancer. Toward the end of Holy Mother's life, when she was bedridden in the Udbodhan house, Brahmachari Ashok was dejected, thinking that he would be helpless without her. To encourage him, she said, "Do you think that even if this body passes away, that I can have any release unless every one of those whose responsibility I have taken on myself is out of bondage? I must constantly live with them. I have taken complete charge of everything, good and bad, regarding them. Is it a trifle to give initiation? It is a tremendous responsibility. How much anxiety I suffer for them. Just see, your father has died, and that at once made me feel worried about you. I thought, how is it that the master is again putting him to the test? That you may come out of this ordeal is my constant prayer. For this reason, I gave you all this advice. Can you understand everything I say? If you could do so, that would lighten my worries to a great extent. The master is playing with his different children in diverse ways, but I have to bear the brunt of it. I cannot simply set aside those whom I have accepted as my own. This is a wonderful commitment here on the part of the mother. And this really highlights the way that that divine relationship works between you and your guru. You know, that this trust in the guru and the guru's commitment to you, not to cross over into their own realization until all of their students have crossed over. We see this commitment on the part of the mother. She's like, do you think that I'm going to, when my body dies, I'm just going to leave you? Is that what you're thinking? He says, do you not know how deeply I care for you, how concerned I am for your well-being, how desperately I want you to have your highest ideal? You know, I will be with you always in that. And so this kind of relationship is meant to be beautifully inspiring. You know, that your guru's commitment to you and you're viewing them as the divine is your lesson of God's commitment to you and his desire, her desire to see you through this whole situation in this world and to bring you out of it into the fullness of your potential, of your being, of what you are. And this is how we're surrounded. We're surrounded by this level of commitment, this level of light, this level of beauty. And seeing it and recognizing it is what charges the battery of our devotion. It's what charges the battery of our intensity, right? Because this is how we begin to understand. This is how we begin to see the nature of the universe that we inhabit here. We begin to understand the nature of this world is pure love. Regardless of how it looks when it's squeezed through a billion egos, in fact, it is still the product of pure love and pure wisdom. And because of that, it always has that potential within it, right? And since we live in a mind, as your mind purifies, it begins to take on those divine principles. You, without any effort on your own part, aside from making yourself available to the beloved, become love, become a manifestation of love, an expression of wisdom, because that's what your nature is. And as we get over this illness of being attached to body and mind, what happens is we begin to get what you could say we become healthy inside. And we start feeling these natural feelings, this natural affinity for others, this natural compassion, empathy for living things around us, this natural way of approaching even inanimate objects as being animated by the presence of God. So we talk to flowers and grasshoppers and leaves, and we stroke trees nicely, and we reach down and whisper in the dog's ear how happy we are for a visit from the beloved today, you know, as they're licking our hand. And we just never forget that all of this is the presence of God. And when we begin to see the presence of God in all of these things, we begin to hear the messages, the way the dog licks at you, the way the dog wags its tails, the way the cat sits in your lap, you know, the beauty of the flower, the way the mountain is there catching the sun and handing it back to you. You know, this world becomes very much child's play. And that's why Jesus and the other incarnations have said, you know, unless you become like a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God, right? Unless you give yourself up from these adult ways to the ways of wonder, to your proper place in the universe, which is a child deeply loved by the universal parent, right? Deeply nurtured and deeply taken care of. And the faith that you have grows in that way. The relationship between the guru and the disciple is eternal. Holy Mother demonstrated how to lead a spiritual life by continually practicing japa. Japa is that repeating of the name of God, right? Because the name invokes the presence. And so we talk about living like Brother Lawrence in the constant remembrance of God, the constant presence of God, and feeling and becoming more and more attuned to that presence until it really begins to dominate our experience of being. That presence becomes bigger than our own. I chuckle because it's the only one that's real. Our presence is imagined. And it's funny how in spiritual life, everything inverts. At the beginning, all the things that are real seem to us as imagination because we're very well practiced in not seeing them that way. But as we stick with our practice and continually make ourselves available to the beloved, in time, that which was real becomes apparent to us. And we begin to see, oh my gosh, I've had it backwards this whole time. Right? And then these things that seemed unreal become more dominant than the external world, become more real to us than the things of change. All right. Once you start noticing that there is, in fact, a part of you deep in there that never changes, once you become aware of that part of you, that becomes the part you reach for, right? Anytime you slip, what do? You reach for a tree branch, or you reach for a rock. You reach for something not moving. And so once you find that unchanging absolute, the presence of the divine within you, that presence of God, then you know where to grab. When things get difficult, when things start falling apart in the outside world, the world of change, you know what to grab, you know where to go, and you go to that unchanging shrine inside. Even when she was sick in bed, she repeated her mantra mentally. She slept very little. One night, Brahmachari Bharata asked, "Mother, don't you get any sleep?" She replied, "What can I do, my child? All these children come to me with great longing for initiation, but most of them do not repeat the mantra regularly." "And why regularly? Many don't repeat it at all. But since I have taken responsibility for them, should I not see to their welfare? Therefore, I do japa for their sake. I constantly pray to the Master. O Master, awaken their spiritual consciousness. Give them liberation. There is a great deal of suffering in this world. May they not be born here again." So look at that. This again, how we learn the love of God. This is how we learn the love of God. We see this commitment in Mother. She gives you your mantra and you don't even practice it. But she doesn't do what most of us would do, be like, "Oh, fine, go your way. Suffer for it then. Have your way, I don't care." That's the egoistic way of dealing with it. But Mother is all about the heart. She knows that her nature is pure love and pure wisdom. So she's like, "No, even if you don't do it, I'll do it for you. I will bring you home." And then you see her prayer to the Master, to awaken your own consciousness, awaken your consciousness so that you can see why she's concerned about these things, so that you can see what you're missing out on by not knowing your inner bliss, by not being able to touch that inner love anytime that you need it. Once you begin to find it, and once you begin to know and study its realities, then you can't imagine how you even functioned before. You can't imagine how you got along. In spiritual life, when clouds of doubt and depression hover in the mind, we need someone to reassure us. Holy Mother told Indupusan Sengupa, "Why do you worry, my child? You have occupied a place in my heart. You will not have to do any spiritual discipline. I'm doing it for you." Indu asked, "Mother, do you do the same for all who have received initiation from you?" "Yes, I do," replied the Mother. "You have so many disciples. Do you remember them all?" "I don't recollect all of them, but I repeat the mantra for those whose names I can recall. And for those I cannot remember, I pray to the Master, saying, 'Master, I have many children in various places. Please look after those whose names I can't recall, and please take care of their well-being.'" Swami Vishweshwarananda was a disciple of the mother and lived in Udbodhan house. One day he candidly said to her, "Mother, you initiate so many people, but you never inquire about them. You don't even give a thought about what is happening to them. A guru keeps a keen eye on his disciples, seeing whether they are developing spiritually. It would be better if you did not give initiation to so many people. You should initiate only as many as you can keep in touch with." Well, that's a bold thing to do. All right, let's see what she says. Holy Mother replied, "But the master never forbade me to do so." The mic drops. But the master never forbade me to do so. He instructed me about so many things. Would he not have told me something about what you have said? I give the responsibility for my disciples to the master. Every day I pray to him, "Please look after the disciples wherever they may be." Further, I receive those mantras from the master himself. These are Siddha mantras. They're very powerful. One is sure to attain liberation through them. Once in Jairamati, Vireshwarananda asked, "Mother, how does one realize God? Worship, japa, meditation, do these help?" "None of these helps," replied the mother. Then how does one get the vision of God? It is only through God's grace. But one must practice meditation and japa. They remove the impurities of the mind. One must practice spiritual disciplines such as worship, japa, and meditation. As one gets the fragrance of a flower by handling it, or as one gets the smell of sandalwood by rubbing it against a stone, in the same way one gets spiritual awakening by constantly thinking of God. But you can realize God right now if you become desireless, right? And so this is the thing. This is why this latest understanding, I guess that's how I say it, for myself, is this fact that there's non-doership in practice, that we're making ourselves available to God in the same way, like the philosopher's stone turns a base metal into gold, just by a mere touch. And so this is our nature. We become reminded of our nature. We become purified of our confusions. We get purified of our delusions by this constant awareness, by this constant discerning, combing our hair, as it were, combing the spiritual hair of this world so that it's not knotted and tangled and so confusing to us. Right? But it's important always to remember realization is the one effect that has no cause, the sages say. So you cannot work your way to realization. It can't be done. That's why we talk about spiritual practice being a making yourself available to, by placing yourself in the presence. That's why we talk about it as like getting a suntan. When you do a suntan, you're not doing the tanning. I mean, in effect, you are doing the tanning, but it's not you doing the tanning, right? It's the universe tanning you, as it were. And so what we're doing in our practice is sitting in the spiritual light of a perfect love and a perfect wisdom, right, through our being. And by that practice, we get a suntan. By that practice, we become love itself. We become free, right? But it's not a doing. It's not an achievement. Why? Because it's an uncovering. It's an uncovering of what you already are, but have covered with inches of delusion, stacks of dust of confusion that has had you forget who you are, forget your divine nature, and you've acted as a body and as a mind for your whole life. And you don't know what it means to not be body and mind, because that's all you've ever worked at, right? What is the experience of not being a body and not being a mind? That's the humorous part that I've mentioned before. It's like, here you are looking for God. Have you ever seen him or her? No. Do you know what he or she looks like? No. Do you know where you lost them? No. Then good luck finding them. You're not going to find something that you don't know what it looks like. You don't know where you lost it. You don't know when you had it. How in the world do you think you're going to find it? You see? So it's an act of grace It's not an act of you picking up every rock and looking under it in the entire universe. It's you making yourself available so that that which is obvious can become apparent to you. That you are divine in nature. This is not a material world that you live in. It is the mind of the beloved, right? And that it is sourced in love and wisdom. On the 11th of February, 1913, at Udbodhan House, Holy Mother told Arupananda the mystery of the mantra and its power. Power passes through the mantra. The guru's power enters into the disciple, and the disciple's power enters into the guru. That is why, when I initiate and accept the disciple's sins, I fall sick. It is extremely difficult to be a guru, because the guru assimilates the disciple's sin. If the disciple commits any sin, that affects the guru. On the other hand, by leading a virtuous life, the disciple does good to the teacher. It is hard for ordinary people to comprehend how one can absorb the results of another person's karma. Although Holy Mother was without sin, she suffered terribly from taking on the sins of others. She knew the cause of her suffering, yet she continued to give initiation and to look after the devotees. One day, when several devotees came for initiation, she told her attendant, "My son, I feel as if I am wrestling all day. The devotees are coming without any break. This body cannot bear any more. I'm praying to the Master and keeping my mind in this world by holding on to Radu." This feeling was momentary. It disappeared when anybody approached her for initiation. Arupananda said, "Mother, don't you initialize those who come to you? Mother, don't you initiate those who you wish to initiate?" Holy Mother, "No, I initiate people purely out of compassion. They do not leave me alone. They weep. That moves my heart, and I give initiation out of kindness. Otherwise, what do I gain? When I initiate devotees, I have to accept their sins." Holy Mother's heart bled when she saw the pain and agony of her children. She forgot her rheumatic pain and the malarial fever. She said, "This body will one day surely perish. Let it go now if it must, but let them realize the truth through this initiation." On another occasion, she remarked, "Now and then I think of this body. Instead of being such a small frame of bones and flesh, were a big one. How many more people could I help?" Right? How many more people could I help? Yeah, that's her thought. That's what unselfishness looks like right there. That's what universal love looks like. That's what a love with no condition looks like. Hmm. Hmm. At Kualpara, Narayan Iyengar, a disciple of the Mother, hesitated to touch her feet because he thought this would cause her pain. Holy Mother said, "No, my child, we are born for this purpose. If we do not accept others' sins and sorrows and do not digest them, who else will? Who will bear the responsibilities of the wicked and the afflicted?" Wow, that's a big thought. We are born for this purpose. If we do not accept others' sins and sorrows and do not digest them, who else will? Who will bear the responsibilities of the wicked and the afflicted? Sarajubala Sen, a disciple of the Mother, recorded in her memories the purpose of the advent of Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. "One day I went to Udbodhan to see the Mother and heard the monks telling her, 'Mother, after your recovery this time, we will not allow anyone to receive initiation from you. You suffer terribly by absorbing the sins of your disciples.' The Mother smiled softly and said, 'Why do you say so, my children? Did the Master come this time only to eat rasgolas? Do you think he just came to eat dessert? Why do you think he was here?' This compassionate statement silenced everyone. One day, the mother was in excruciating pain from her rheumatism. Her attendant said, "I hear that you have this horrible disease because you take the sins of your devotees. I have a humble request. Please do not suffer for my sake. Allow me to suffer the consequences of my own sin." Immediately, the compassionate mother replied, "What do you mean, my son? You keep well. Let me suffer." All right, we're going to stop there for tonight.